Hey everybody, Tim here with today's episode of Star Trek Voyager, Season 6, Episode 4, Tinker, Tenor, Dr. Spy. Probably one of my favorite episodes, at least in my top 5 of Voyager, if not my top 10 of Star Trek. I love this episode. I talk about this episode all the time. Even as a kid, this episode stuck with me, mostly for the emergency command hologram, which I'll get to when we get to that part of the episode. But I love this one. This one is so good, and I get like a lot of people don't like this one because they think it's like too funny and stuff. I'm fine with it. I think it's great. It shows off Robert Picardo's acting ability, his singing ability. Everything is great about this episode. So, from the very beginning, when he's starting with his lecture about to get to the Milky Way, take a left, then a right, then another left. And then, like, it's just great. And then he sings the Donna la Mobile, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, he's doing opera, and it's a well-known opera, and, I mean, it's even in the Punisher movie, like, it's a great opera. And then once he starts transforming it and, like, making it up to Tuvok having emotion, like, it's fantastic. I am all in for this episode. And he brings up that, Tuvok should be going through Pon farr because it's been 7 years about. And that's a good point. Like, either Tuvok went through Pon farr just before Voyager started, or he went through it and we never saw it in the series. So I don't remember if we actually see him go through it or not. So that's a really good topic. Like, I'm really curious and I need to do some research. So, we realize that the Doctor has changed his programming, so now has the ability to daydream. And Kim even says, like, everybody daydreams once in a while, like, why not the Doctor? And he's like, that's my point! So, the formal Grievous part, which is great, like, Captain of Starship Enterprise, from Emergency Medical Hologram, Starship Voyager, I said Enterprise. So, the Captain of the Voyager, from Voyager, and it's a great scene where Chakotay hands it to her. I'm so excited, like, I'm fumbling over my words. That's how much I love this episode. And so, the formal Grievous, and she replies, and she's basically like, I'm sorry, but no. And so, in the meantime, we see this alien species, and they dub Voyager an unacceptable risk. And so right there, like, you can tell that they're going to be important, and it's just gone. As fast as they show up, they're gone. The whole ladies' man scene where, like, B'Elanna's playing with his leg and Seven of Nine's texting him, and Janeway's like, oh, I have an old Academy injury, like, right on her ass. Like, stuff like that. I'm loving this whole thing. You are dismissed. Like, it's so good. Like, I love this episode. So then we find out that the alien is actually watching the Doctor's dream. And so you can clearly tell, like, it's one of those where you see it slowly spiraling and you're like, this is going to blow up and it's going to be great. I really loved the scene where he talks to Neelix, and he's like, what do you daydream? And he's like, well, in my culture, we think that the dreams actually dream the dreamer. So my number one favorite movie of all time, in case anybody ever is wondering, is The Birdcage. And that's one of the plots, is his whole play about, like, how you dream up her, and now she's your fantasy, but she sees you, and you become her fantasy, and then the fantasy becomes the reality. It's kind of what Neelix just said, where the dreams think that they dreamt up the dreamer. Like, that's so Inception. Like, I love it. I can totally get behind it. So I'm totally in for that. We start to see one of his dreams is activate the emergency command hologram. And it's great because his clothes turn red, and then the little pips, which unfortunately was bad editing because you can see him kind of wiggle a little bit, but the pips don't move. So you can clearly tell that they were just added in there. And then, like, there's the whole over my dead program and fire the photonic cannon. Like, all of that's great. Which I'm going to stop there for just a brief second. What's interesting about this makes Robert Picardo one of the very few characters who has worn red, blue, and yellow. In fact, off the top of my head, I know a lot of minor characters have done it over the years, and we've seen a lot of people switch colors. Like, we saw Worf in gold and red, we saw Picard in red and blue, but we don't see them in all three very often. Off the top of my head, I can only think of the Doctor because he's wearing red in this one. He always wears blue because he's the Doctor. But then when he's Louis Zimmerman, he wears the yellow. So we see the Doctor in all three, or at least Robert Picardo in all three. The only other character I can come up with off the top of my head is actually Sulu, because in the very first episode, he does wear blue, and then from then on he wears yellow, and then when he's in command he wears red. But by that time everybody wears red, so I don't know if that counts. But so Sulu and the Doctor are like the only characters off the top of my head, I'm sure there's more, that wear all three colors throughout the series. So that's super interesting to me. So I like how they start trying to fix the daydreams, because at this point he's daydreaming whether or not he wants to, and so he's in the engineering, and like he's like, I have to eject the core, and it's funny because you can hear the computer in the background, who's played by the Majel Barrett, like Luoxana Troy, and usually like she's such a flat voice as the computer, but in this one she's like, the warp core breached sooner than you think it is, last chance to be a hero, Doctor. And it's so great because you're like, oh, that's Majel Barrett, now I can hear it. So that was awesome. They end up putting his dreams in the holodeck to see what he's dreaming. And the first thing Janeway says is like, is that like allowed? Because that seems like it's kind of like rude, basically, like, because we shouldn't be in his personal space, but they do it anyway. And of course the first thing they walk into is him painting 7 of 9 nude, and she's like, well, he's had lots of practice. And then there's all these paintings, but they clearly don't have the chest area complete, they're just like done. So it's like, that's kind of funny. And that's kind of something we'll see a little bit later on with like Q2. Everybody tries to get 7 naked, which is no surprise. When the alien finally realizes it's the dream, and he's like, oh, I've made a mistake. And so now he's going to try to reach out to the Doctor. But first, so the Doctor's fixed now, and he's so embarrassed, which is kind of a sign of sentient, that he knows that he shouldn't have been doing this. But Janeway even says, like, hey, I mean, we can't really control this. So it's kind of funny because, so Janeway is talking to, or no, I'm sorry, Chakotay's talking to Janeway about, like, maybe we actually should put him in contact. Like, what do you think about actually putting the emergency command hologram in place? And Chakotay's like, well, would you feel comfortable handing control of Voyager to a hologram, to a computer? And that's a big topic. Like, there was a whole episode of the original series that was about that, the ultimate computer, where they took the Enterprise away from Kirk to have the computer be in control. Here it is 150 years later or so, and clearly they haven't done that because there's still people on board, and we wouldn't have a TV show. But it's interesting that they're still talking about, like, giving computers more control, which is something we deal with today. Like, I work retail, and there's huge debates on, like, the self-check machines, and people love them, and people hate them, and they take jobs away, which they really don't, and stuff like that. So it's super interesting to see Voyager talking about this in 1999. So the alien finally contacts the Doctor, which is kind of a great scene where he basically he's like, I'm dreaming again, and he's like, no, I initiated this, and he has to go to Janeway to explain it, and Janeway's like, I told you not to do this, and he's like, I didn't do it. And so the only way to get around this is these 3 ships are going to start attacking Voyager, and so the Doctor has to pretend to be in command. And so Janeway's like, she didn't even bat an eye. She's like, well, we got to turn fantasy into reality, which is so hard not to sing that line. And so we finally see the Doctor get to sit in the captain's chair. And it's such a great scene to watch him sit down in there. Of course, he bluffs them out with the photonic cannon again. And basically we end as happy as we started. But it's such a good episode. Like, everything about this episode is so much fun. And I really, really enjoyed this one. Like, the Robert Picardo episodes are great. Like, the Doctor is such a great character. And his acting shines through so well. For those who have seen this one, what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Go ahead, let me know. Thank you guys for those who have subscribed. It means a lot to me, and I will see you guys next time for Alice.